Baseball Prospectus has released their latest PECOTA standings. I'm going to give you my thoughts. Let's get into it. All right, so starting off with the Yankees, they have 89.7. Let's just round that to 90. Last year, they had 94 wins en route to a World Series. Now, they did lose a huge player in Juan Soto. He had right around an 8 wins above replacement on Fangraphs this past year. So, yeah, that's a lot to make up for. They also lost Gleyber Torres to the Tigers. Verdugo's still a free agent. That's around a couple of wins combined, I would say. Clay Holmes, Tommy Kahnle, Tim Hill in the bullpen. I'd say that's around a win to a win and a half, wins above replacement between the 3, maybe even 2. But then they've made a lot of additions to make up for all this. Now, Max Fried, I think is going to be very solid for them. I think he fits Yankee Stadium very well. I think he's an easy 3 wins above replacement. I think he's going to be a very stable guy for them. Cody Bellinger, I think, is very interesting. A couple of years ago, had that bounce back year with the Cubs. He was a 4 wins above replacement that year. Put his bat at Yankee Stadium, where I think it fits very well. I think he could very well get to that number again. Devin Williams, great addition for the back end of their bullpen. We all know what this guy can do when he's healthy. I think it's a safe bet. He could be anywhere from a 1.5 to a 2 wins above replacement. I think Fernando Cruz is an underrated arm, gets a lot of strikeouts. Paul Goldschmidt, I think, is going to be a solid addition overall. You got some young guys that could contribute with the Yankees. Now, I do think they will step back a little bit this past year, but they made a lot of additions here. I think in the end, they're probably going to be right around that 92 to 93 win range. Moving on to the Orioles, they have 89.2 wins, so let's round that to 89. Now, coming off a 91 win season, they had an interesting offseason. I don't think they had a bad offseason necessarily, but they lacked that big move, especially after losing guys like Corbin Burns, Anthony Santander. That's right around 7 to 8 Fangraph wins above replacement total. So to not add a big ticket guy out there, I think was a bit lackluster. Now, they added a lot of solid pieces. Tyler O'Neill, I think, is a safe bet, if healthy, to be a 2 to a 3 win player. Gary Sanchez, I think, will give you some decent production there. Tomoyuki Sagano, I think, is a bit of a wild card here. You know, how's his stuff going to translate over to Major League Baseball coming over from Japan? You know, he's 35 years old, has a lot of pitches that he plays with, not a whole lot of velocity. So it'll be interesting to see what he gives you. I think I would probably go a 1 win above replacement right now, but who knows? Maybe he shocks some people. Charlie Morton, you know, he's going to give you some solid production at the back end of the rotation there. I think that's a safe bet for this projection here, right around 1 win above replacement. Kittredge, I think, will be a good addition for the bullpen. Now, where I think the Orioles are really banking is having more progression from the guys within, right? You're looking at guys like Adley Rutschman coming off a bad second half last year. I think you're going to see him, you know, make those adjustments here coming into 2025. I think he'll have a better season overall. Jackson Holliday, you know, he had some good moments this past year, but overall, I'd say it was a pretty down rookie year. But hey, normal offseason, normal spring. I think he's going to end up having a much better year next year. Grayson Rodriguez had the lat injury this past year. Hopefully he stays healthy over a full year. So, you know, I think with all the decent additions that they made, along with, you know, the young talent that could take a step forward this year, you know, even if you have someone like Gunnar Henderson maybe take a bit of a step back this year after a great season, I still think you're going to see right around the same with what the Orioles had last year, right around that 91 win mark. You know, maybe they could approach 93 to 95, but I'll go a little over on this total. Moving on to the Blue Jays, they got 84.5 wins. Let's round that up to 85. Now, a down year for the Blue Jays this past year, only 74 wins overall, but they've had a very productive offseason. There were some question marks there where it looked like they were having trouble trying to land anyone, but they've put together a pretty good offseason. Now, when it comes to guys that they lost, they didn't really lose all that much. Jordan Romano had a very down year this past year. You know, lost a couple of bullpen arms, Ryan Yarbrough, Cabrera, but not really all that much overall. They've more improved the team, bringing in Max Scherzer. If he's healthy, I think should be right around a 2-win player. Santander is going to bring a good amount of power to the middle of the order, give good protection for Vlad. So maybe even see a bit of a better year from Vlad because he has that better protection now. So I think that's going to be right around 3 wins. Hoffman, great addition for the back end of the bullpen. Andres Jimenez is going to give you a great glove at second base. Maybe they can get more out of that bat. You know, this past year was a bit down, but I think they're also banking on Bo Bichette having a bounce back year, dealt with some injuries this past year. We all know what he can do when he's healthy, has a great track record. Maybe get a little bit more out of George Springer. You got some younger guys here like Will Wagner. You got Joey Loperfido that maybe can contribute this coming year. I think the Blue Jays, this 84.5 win mark, I think that's right around where I'm at. I'm going to say in that 83 to 85 win range. So I think that's a good projection. Moving on to the Rays, and they got 82 wins. And honestly, I think the Rays are being slept on a little bit here. Even with all the injuries they had this past year, they still finished with 80 wins. They made a couple of additions here. Ha-Seong Kim, he is going to miss the early part of the year after getting shoulder surgery, but I think he's one of the more underrated players in the game. I think he's going to be very solid for them when he comes back. He's going to give you good defense, good speed, a tough at-bat. I think that was a great addition. Honestly, I think one of the more underrated additions this past offseason. They added a solid catcher in Danny Jansen. He's going to give you some decent production there. Even if you don't get a whole lot out of the bat, he's still going to give you good defense. But I think the key for the Rays is what they're going to be getting out of Junior Caminero. I mean, my goodness, I think this guy's going to be an absolute beast. They're projecting him for right around a 3.5 wins above replacement. And don't forget about Shane McClanahan. Remember, he got elbow surgery, but before that, he was one of the top pitchers in the game. This guy was doing great stuff, and they're thinking he's going to be right around 150 innings pitched for this coming year. So add all that in here, and I think the Rays have a great shot and maybe approaching 90 wins overall. You know, maybe even getting a bit more out of Josh Lowe, who was very good a couple of years ago. Brandon Lau, hopefully better health. Christopher Morel, remember they brought him in the Isak Paredes trade. Maybe they can get a bit more out of him as well. You got some good young pitching here. Honestly, I think they're going a little low here. I would actually say 85 wins at the minimum, you know, maybe even approach that 90 win mark. I think a lot of people are looking negatively at Tampa right now because, you know, they're going to be playing in a minor league park. I feel like people are just kind of forgetting about them, but this team, man, they always fly under the radar. I think they're going to have themselves a pretty solid year. Moving on to my Red Sox, and they got 77.6. Let's round that to 78 wins, and I completely disagree with that. Here come the Draft Nick Robbie comments, but hear me out. Now, this past year, they finished with 81 wins. I just don't see how they have them taking a step back with all the additions that they've made, with all the young talent that they have coming up the pipe, along with guys that could bounce back from some injury-riddled seasons this past year. I feel like 78 wins is just a bit low, if you ask me. Now, they did lose Tyler O'Neill, Nick Pivetta, Kenley Jansen, Chris Martin. I would say that's anywhere from 7 to 8 wins above replacement total, but they brought in an ace of the staff and Garrett Crochet. I think he's going to be a Cy Young contender this coming year. Had a 4.7 F-WAR in his first season as a starter, coming back from Tommy John. So I definitely think he can take a bigger step forward, especially, you know, working with Andrew Bailey. I think that's an easy 5 wins above replacement. You brought in Walker Buehler. You know, sure, he just came back from a second Tommy John this past year, but he looked great in the postseason. He's going to have a normal offseason, normal spring training. I think Walker Buehler is going to end up being pretty solid for them. You know, Patrick Sandoval, he's still working his way back from elbow surgery, but he can contribute in the second half. Don't forget about Lucas Giolito. He's going to be fully ready for opening day. He's going to be good at the back end of the rotation there, give you good innings. They bolstered the bullpen with Aroldis Chapman, Justin Wilson. They got Garrett Whitlock, hopefully going to be healthy this coming year, but he was dominant as a reliever back in 2021. Hasn't been able to stay healthy over the last couple of years. You know, he's been trying to be a starter. That hasn't really worked out. So hopefully you can get back to that 2021 Garrett Whitlock. And then, you know, Trevor Story, obviously this guy's been so injury riddled over the last few years. If he stays healthy, I think he's going to be a solid contributor for the Red Sox. He's going to give you great defense at shortstop. But even if he's not healthy, even if something happens with him, you got Marcelo Meyer knocking on the door, one of the top prospects in the game. He could easily slide in. I think he's going to end up being very good for them. So you have some insurance there. You know, Tristan Casas, there's a lot of power in that bat. He does need to stay on the field, but if he does, you know you're going to get a good bat in the middle of the order there. Masataka Yoshida, he dealt with shoulder issues this past year, but overall, solid hitter for you if he can stay on the field. You know, Vaughn Grissom, they brought him back in the Chris Sale trade. You know, if he stays healthy, you know, finally gets that bat going, that could be nice for the Red Sox lineup. But even if he doesn't produce, you got someone like Christian Campbell, one of the top prospects in the game, had a meteoric rise in the minor leagues this past year. I think this is a guy that the Red Sox think very highly of, and I feel like they think he could be ready on opening day. We'll just have to wait and see. You also got Roman Anthony, one of the top prospects in the game. He could definitely contribute this coming year. You also got some young pitching that could contribute, like Quinn Priester. Hunter Dobbins, I think, is an underrated pitching prospect. So, yeah, overall, I just disagree with this. Sure, maybe you could have a bit of regression from Jarren Duran. He had an amazing year this past year. Even if he takes a bit of a step back, maybe even Tanner Houck possibly take a bit of a step back. I just think, with all of these additions that they brought in, the young talent coming up, you have better depth. I simply just disagree with this projection. I think 85 wins is a pretty safe bet. On to the AL Central. They got 86 wins for the Twins after only winning 82 games this past year and falling short of the postseason. And unfortunately, the only moves they made this offseason was adding Diego Cartaya and Mickey Gasper. Now, I think they're counting on guys taking steps forward this coming year, along with better health from guys like Carlos Correa, Byron Buxton. They both missed a lot of time this past year, but they did do well in the time that they played, along with Royce Lewis, very good bat when he's healthy. I think they're expecting a lot of big things out of Brooks Lee, former top prospect in the game, had a cup of coffee this past year. Let's see what he can do in his second year. Simeon Woods Richardson had his first full season in the rotation this past year. Let's see what he can do in 2025. Emmanuel Rodriguez, one of the top prospects in the game. Can he contribute at the major league level? Now, when it comes to the rotation, I think you have a lot of floor here. I would like to see a bit more ceiling, so I just wonder how much of the rotation is going to give you overall, but it's pretty solid for the most part. I like Duran and Jax at the back end of the bullpen. I'd like to see a bit more beef, in the middle. Let's see, could they maybe add someone in free agency here? We'll see. For depth within the organization, you got Zebby Matthews, you got David Festa on the pitching side of things. Maybe they can contribute a bit more this coming year. Overall, I would say I'm probably a little lower than this right now. I think just because of the question marks they have with the health, not really adding anything this offseason, I would say right around 84 wins feels right. On to the Royals, and they got 81 wins for Kansas City after winning 86 games this past year and making the postseason. Now, the Royals didn't do a ton this offseason, but I felt like they made a couple of pretty solid moves, bringing in Carlos Estevez for the back end of the bullpen, along with Jonathan India for the lineup. Now, I like the way the Royals lineup is looking. Obviously, Bobby Witt Jr., this guy's a star. Very excited to see what he can do after the incredible year that he just had. Hopefully, Vinny Pasquantino can be a bit more healthy overall. Let's see if Hunter Renfroe, MJ Melendez can give you a bit more production there. Can you see Michael Massey maybe take a step forward this coming year? Kyle Isbell, I would like to see a bit more out of him. Maikel Garcia, good speed, but can you get a bit more production out of the bat? When it comes to the pitching side of things, hey, I love the rotation with Reagans and Lugo. I think you could see a bit of regression from Lugo this coming year, going into his age 35 season, but I think Reagans is still going to be very solid. You got some good depth here with Walker, Lorenzen, Bubic, and Marsh. You added Estevez to the bullpen, like I said. I love Lucas Urquidy back there. You got Hunter Harvey back here, Schreiber. Solid bullpen overall. I think the Royals, they're a safe bet to be right around what they were this coming year. I'd say 85, 87 wins feels about right. On to Cleveland. They got 80.4, so let's round that down to 80 wins after just making it to the American League Championship Series and winning 92 games this past year. Now, with Cleveland, they did lose a couple of key guys. Josh Naylor, they traded him to the Diamondbacks. Andres Jimenez to the Blue Jays. They brought in a couple of free agents like Paul Sewald. They brought back Carlos Santana. So Josh Naylor, Jimenez, that's right around 4 to 5 wins above replacement total. Sewald, Santana, I'd say that's probably right around 2 total. But they're going to be banking on some of these young guys to take steps forward, like Kyle Manzardo. I think he's got a very good bat. Didn't fully figure it out this past year. He did show some things, but he's going to get a lot more playing time this coming year. I'm excited to see what he can do. Shane Bieber will be back at some point. That's going to be a nice lift for the rotation. And I think they're banking on some of these guys taking steps forward, right? Tanner Bybee was solid this past year, but, Gavin Williams, you want to see a bit more production out of him, especially Tristan McKenzie. This guy was so good a couple of years ago. Let's see if he can get himself right. You brought in Luis Ortiz. Ben Lively showed some good things this past year. The bullpen is going to be very good. You got arms all over the place here. So I think the Guardians, maybe they could take a bit of a step back this coming year, but I don't think it's going to be this drastic at 80 wins. Moving on to the Tigers, and they only got 79 wins for Detroit. I think that's very low. Had a great second half, ended up finishing with 86 wins overall, made it to the postseason, and they didn't really lose anything this offseason, right? Not really much when it comes to free agents. They didn't really trade away anyone. And they've only added, right? You just brought back Jack Flaherty. He was great for the Tigers before going to the Dodgers this past year. If he's fully healthy this coming year, hey, I think he's a 3-win player for you. You also brought in Alex Cobb, veteran guy for the rotation there. Hopefully he can stay healthy. Tommy Kahnle's nice for the bullpen. You brought in Gleyber Torres for the lineup. I don't know if I agree with this projection of 3 wins above replacement in that ballpark. I don't know about that. Let's see what he can do, but I think he's going to be at least solid for the most part for you. And then they just got all this young talent in the lineup. I'm expecting a lot of these guys to take a step forward. Colt Keith, hopefully he can be a bit more consistent this coming year. Jace Young, there's a lot of potential in that bat. Riley Green did a lot of good things this past year. Parker Meadows, can you get a bit more out of him in the rotation? Reese Olson looked pretty solid this past year. Jackson Jobe, top pitching prospect in the game, minus Roki Sasaki. Let's see what he can do this coming year. Casey Mize, can he take a step forward? You get a lot of arms in this bullpen. Honestly, I think this is a bit of a ridiculous projection. I think they only took a step forward here. I think 90 wins to the Tigers is perfectly reasonable. On to the White Sox, and they got 61.5, so let's go to 62. Now, the White Sox, obviously a terrible season this past year, only winning 41 games. You're really looking at the young talent here for the Chicago White Sox, and they traded away Garrett Crochet. That is not going to help them at all this coming year. So you're looking at guys like Kyle Teal, Chase Majdroff to come up, maybe get some time this year. I think those are solid players. I think they'll definitely be good for the White Sox moving forward. One of their top prospects, Colson Montgomery, he struggled throughout the year last year, but he looked good in the final month. I wouldn't be surprised to see him come up this year. Maybe Edgar Quero, his bat looked pretty good in the minors last year. On the pitching side of things, Noah Schultz. This guy looked great this past year. Moved all the way up to Double-A. I wouldn't be surprised to see him make his debut at the major leagues this year. One guy to pay attention to, Sean Burke, had a cup of coffee this past year, put up some pretty decent numbers. But, if I'm looking at this projection here, I don't know if the White Sox even get to 55 wins. I'll say anywhere from 50 to 55, especially after losing Garrett Crochet. Moving on to the AL West, they got the Rangers at 89.3. Let's round that down to 89 wins. I love this projection. I think the Rangers are primed for a bounce back year. Only won 78 games this past year, a World Series hangover for them. They had a lot of injuries this past year. Now, they did lose Max Scherzer to the Blue Jays, Kirby Yates to the Dodgers, Andrew Heaney's probably not coming back. That's right around 5 wins above replacement total. But then they made a lot of low-key moves that I really liked. Jock Peterson, Jake Berger, that's going to be some nice thump in the middle of the order. I think that's right around 3 to 4 wins above replacement total. Chris Martin, Sean Armstrong, just a couple of the additions that they made for the bullpen. They're going to have a lot more stability back there as well. So I think that's going to be a couple of wins added on. Kyle Higashioka, good backup catcher for them. I think that's going to be at least a win. And then I'm taking a look at some of these guys that are going to be coming back from injury, most notably Jacob deGrom. We all know what this guy can do when he's healthy. They're projecting him to be a 4-win player this coming year. That's a big ask, especially with the injury concerns he's had over the years, but he absolutely can get that if he can stay on the field. So that would be massive for them. And then a couple of young guys that were injured a lot last year, Evan Carter, Josh Young. I think they're more than capable of being a 2-win player each. And then you got some young pitching, Kumar Rocker. I think he's going to do some big things. Jack Leiter, he had a pretty disastrous first year in the majors last year, but let's see if he can take a step forward. But I think there's a lot of upside here for the Texas Rangers. I think they should easily be able to approach the 90-win mark. On to the Astros. They have 86.9, so let's round that to 87. That's 1 win less than they had this past year at 88. A lot of losses for the Astros this year. Kyle Tucker, Ryan Presley going to the Cubs. Alex Bregman is still a free agent. Is he going to be coming back? I have no idea. Justin Verlander going to the Giants. Yusei Kikuchi going to the Angels. So you got a lot of losses here. Kyle Tucker, Bregman, that's around 8 wins above replacement total. I would say Verlander, Kikuchi, with the half a season or from the 1/3 of a season from Kikuchi and Verlander, that's probably right around 2 wins above replacement total. Presley, that's about 1. So you're looking at around 10 wins above replacement that they lost, but then they brought in some guys, right? Isaac Paredes came back in the Kyle Tucker trade. I think he's safe to be a 3 to a 4 WAR player. Christian Walker, I think, is safe for 3. And you got some guys coming back like Lance McCullers Jr., Luis Garcia for the rotation. Let's see what they can do this coming year when it comes to some of these guys in the rotation already. Hunter Brown. when it comes to some of these guys in the rotation already. Hunter Brown, he looked very good this past year. Can he do more this coming season? Spencer Arrighetti, he had a decent year this past year. They also brought in Hayden Wesneski. Can they get a bit more out of him? You know, Renel Blanco, he showed a lot of good things this past year. What's he going to look like? What's his follow-up act going to be? You still got some good arms at the back end of the bullpen. Forrest Whitley, what's he going to do this coming year? I think there's a lot of question marks with the Astros right now. I think if Bregman comes back, they should be able to get to 90 wins. But right now, I think this is about right. Moving on to the Mariners, they have them at 85.8. So let's round that up to 86 wins. That would be a 1-win improvement from this past year, but it was a disappointing season overall. Finished with a record of 85-77. Just missed the playoffs this past year, and not really a ton this offseason. A pretty disappointing offseason overall. They brought back Jorge Polanco. He missed a lot of time this past year. Pretty underproductive for the most part. Let's see if they can get something out of him. Donovan Solano, I think, is fine. He'll get some time at first base, maybe around the infield. And J.P. Crawford, I think a lot is riding on him. He missed a lot of time this past year. He's shown he could be a very productive player for them in the past. They're projecting 3 wins above replacement. That would be a nice boost for the Mariners, but they absolutely need to get more out of Mitch Haniger and Mitch Garver. These guys were terrible with the bats this past year. Now, a lot of this rides on the Mariners offense, right? They did make the manager change to Dan Wilson. They brought in Edgar Martinez to lead the way in terms of hitting. Now, the pitching is going to be great. One of the best rotations in all of baseball. Bullpen is great, but hey, even with all this pitching, they couldn't get it done this past year. It comes down to the offense. They need to be consistent. Let's see if, Julio Rodriguez, right? Let's mention him, star of the show. Sure, a good year this past year, a 3.8 F4 overall, but you'd like to see a bit better on the slugging. Only had a 409 on the slugging, 20 homers. Julio Rodriguez, this is a guy that, should be 30 to 35 home runs per year. Let's see if they can get a bit more out of him. They are giving him a nice boost here when it comes to his projection, a 6-win player for next year. So a lot of things have to go right with the offense, but I think they have the right guys now leading the way. I would give them a little bit more because I'm going to bank on the fact that the offense is going to be a little bit better this coming year. I still think the pitching is going to be solid. So I'll go anywhere from 87 to 90 wins. On to the Angels, and they have 76.4. So let's round down to 76 wins. Not a good year for the Angels this past year. Yet again, only 63 wins. Sure, they brought in Kikuchi. They brought in Hendricks. That'll add a few wins right there. They're obviously banking on Mike Trout to finally be healthy. We know what this guy can do. One of the best players of all time when he is healthy, but that's a big ask. You don't even know what you're going to get out of him moving forward, especially Anthony Rendon. I mean, at this point, what does he have left in the tank? Jorge Soler, that's a decent right-handed bat to bring in with some pop there. You do got some young talent here, right? Christian Moore, I hope he gets up to the Angels this year. Nolan Schaumwell, can he take a step forward? Zach Nato, let's see what he can do here in year 2. But overall, I just think this is a lot to make up. Only 66 wins or only 63 wins. I think this is a lot to ask. 63 wins this past year. 76 wins. I think that's fair, but I think it's going to be anywhere from 70 to 75. And let's wrap this up with the Athletics. They actually have Sacramento here. Isn't that neat? Now they got 70.6, so let's round that up to 71. And I'm going to be honest here. Maybe this is a bit of a hot take, but I think that is pretty low. I think the A's this year could be a surprise team. Now, they actually had themselves a decent offseason. They brought in Luis Severino. They traded for Jeffrey Springs. They brought in Jose Leclerc for the bullpen. I think right there, that's around a 4-win improvement just with these additions alone. Also, Gio Urshela, he's going to get a lot of playing time here. I think that's at least a win improvement. And they got so many young guys that can do so many good things. Lawrence Butler looked great this past year. Let's see what he can do in year 2. Jacob Wilson, very excited about him. I think he's going to be so good. Makes a ton of contact. He's like impossible to strike out. He's going to give you solid defense at short. I think that's going to be a few wins right there. Maybe you can get a bit more out of Shea Langeliers, Tyler Soderstrom. I mean, they got all this young talent here that I think is going under the radar a little bit. Now, this past year, they won 69 games. I think you could see right around a 10-win improvement here. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them hit 80 wins. Moving on to the National League, and they have the Braves projected at 92.4 wins. Let's round that down to 90. 92. They're coming off a season in which they had 89 wins, but they were decimated by injuries this past year. Ronald Acuna Jr., Spencer Strider, Ozzie Albies later on. The list goes on and on and on. And they lost a couple of key guys in free agency. Max Fried going to the Yankees, Charlie Morton going to the Orioles. A couple of other guys like Ramon Laureano, AJ Minter contributed this past year, even Gio Urshela. So overall, they lost about 6 to 7 wins, but they're going to be getting back some key guys. Like I mentioned, Ronald Acuna Jr., we all know how good this guy can be. Now, he is coming off an ACL tear, so I think a 5 wins above replacement projection might be a bit ambitious. I could see at least a 3. Let's see if he can get to a 5, but either way, he is going to be a welcome presence back in the lineup, and Spencer Strider back in the rotation. It looks like he's going to have a normal spring training. I don't think he's going to miss too much time. Either way, he's going to be very good for the rotation moving forward. So I think each of those guys are at least at a 3 wins above replacement, so that would be 6 total. Ozzie Albies, like I said, he got hurt later on in the year. If he stays healthy, you know what he can do. He's very solid. And don't forget about Sean Murphy. He had a 0.8 F4 this year. He is projected to be a 3-win player, has a good track record. I definitely think he gets himself back on track. Austin Riley was inconsistent this past year, but a good track record. I expect a better full season out of him this coming year. And they added Jerickson Profar. I think was a solid addition in free agency this year. And, you know, when you combine the losses of Fried, Charlie Morton, some other guys, and all these guys coming back with some possible progression moving forward, I definitely think for the Braves, I think 92 to 94 wins is fair. On to the New York Mets, and they project them for 89 wins, the same amount as last year, on their way to a National League Championship Series. And my goodness, they had an amazing offseason, no pun intended. They brought in Juan Soto on the biggest contract in Major League Baseball history. Now, Juan Soto last year had an 8 wins above replacement, but half a season was at Yankee Stadium, a ballpark that fit him very well. I think you'll see a slight regression with Juan Soto at a picture-friendly park in Citi Field, but still, I think he's very safe to be a 6 wins above replacement. You brought in Clay Holmes. He's going to be a starter moving away from the bullpen. Let's see how that goes, but I think it's a safe bet to have at least a couple of wins there. Frankie Montas, a bit of a wild card, but the Mets, they did a great job with getting guys back on track last year, like Sean Manaea. So I think Frankie Montas, this will be a good home for him. I think that could at least be a couple of wins. And don't forget about Kadai Senga. Pretty much missed all of last season. This guy was great a couple of years ago. Fully healthy. I definitely think he's going to be productive in this rotation. You brought in AJ Minter, solid arm for the bullpen. Jose Siri for the outfield. Even Nick Madrigal. Maybe he can finally get himself going here, basically taking the place of Jose Iglesias. Now, they did lose a few guys here, right? Luis Severino, he was great for them. That was another guy that got back on track this past year going to the A's. So he's definitely going to be a bit of a loss. Jose Quintana, he was a guy that gave them some innings last year. Harrison Bader gave him some good defense. Like I said, Jose Iglesias, is he coming back at this point? I'm not sure. JD Martinez, he did well against left-handed pitching last year. Now, the big wild card is Pete Alonso. Is he coming back? I don't know. I still think it's very possible. If he does, that's only going to help. Now, to be honest, when it comes to this projected number for the Mets, 89 wins, I think that's a bit low. I think right now you could say anywhere from 94 to 96 wins. Moving on to the Phillies, and they have them projected for 87.5 wins. Let's bump that up to 88. They finished with 95 wins this past year, fell short in the postseason, and then they had an interesting offseason. I feel like they didn't necessarily get worse, but they didn't really get all that much better. Now, you lost Jeff Hoffman, a key guy in their bullpen. He went to the Blue Jays. Carlos Estevez was a good pickup at the deadline. He went to the Royals. Spencer Turnbull, a small sample size this past year, 54 and a third innings pitched, but he was pretty good for them overall. So right there, I think you're losing around 4 wins. But then you brought in Jesus Luzardo. He was very good a couple of years ago with the Marlins, put up some great numbers. But this past year, he dealt with some back issues. So this past year is pretty much a wash for him. But if he gets back to those numbers a couple of years ago, I think that's a safe bet for 3 to 4 wins. Max Kepler, he dealt with some knee issues this past year, so you didn't really see the same numbers that we've seen from him over the last couple of years, but put him in a platoon out there, and I think he ends up being pretty solid for them. Jordan Romano, he's had some elbow issues as of late, but he's been a very good closer in the past, so who knows what's going to happen with him. You brought in Joe Ross for the bullpen. So, there's question marks with these additions, right? Luzardo, Romano, Kepler, Ross is fine, but I just feel like you didn't really have, I feel like you didn't really get all that much better. And to me, if you're not really getting a whole lot better, I feel like that opens up the window more to kind of have some regression, right? Nick Castellanos was not very good this past year. So, what's going to happen with him? JT Realmuto, I feel like we're starting to see some signs of age a little bit. Brandon Marsh, he's got to start hitting a bit better against left-handed pitching. Bryson Stott, the bat was a bit weak this past year. Schwarber, are we going to keep seeing the same power numbers, right? What's going to happen with him moving forward? I think Harper Turner, they're going to be fine. Bohm, can he be a bit more consistent this coming year? We'll see. Now, of course, the rotation, it's going to be good. The bullpen, you got some good arms back here. I still think it's a good team. I'm not trying to harp on the Phillies. I'm just wondering, have they really gotten better necessarily? I think, right now, I'm not seeing a 95 win team. I'm seeing anywhere from, 90 to 94. I think they will take a slight step back. We'll see. But, for the 87.5 that they're projected, I'll go a little higher than that, but not too much higher. On to the Nationals, and they have them projected for a 74 win season after winning 71 this past year. Now, I thought the Nationals maybe could have made a splash this offseason, but in the end, they kept it pretty conservative. They brought in Nate Lowe. I like that. Good addition for the lineup there. I think that's a couple of wins at least. You brought back Josh Bell, Ahmed Rosario, Michael Soroka, Jorge Lopez. So I think those guys all together can give you anywhere from 2 to 4 wins. I don't think you're going to see a whole ton of improvement with the Nationals this year. Now, the big thing is the young guys, right? Dylan Cruz, James Woods, CJ Abrams. What kind of steps forward can they take this coming year? Can Mackenzie Gore tap into another gear there? You got some younger pitching in here as well. The bullpen, I'm a little iffy on. Kyle Finnegan's not coming back, but Finnegan was a 0 wins above replacement this past year, so I don't think that's really all that much of a loss. Obviously he was a big guy for them, on the roster in the clubhouse, but from a numbers point of view, I think Finnegan, I think they will live if they don't bring him back. But in the end, I agree with this. I think around 74, 75, maybe even in the upper 70s is fair. Wrapping up the NL East, they have the Marlins with 62 wins, the same as last year. Now, there's not really a whole lot going on with the Marlins, but you got some young players to keep an eye on. Davison De Los Santos, a lot of power in that bat. Very excited to see what he can do this coming year. Xavier Edwards, he showed some good things this past year. Kyle Stowers, Connor Norby, they got back in a trade with Baltimore. Let's see what these guys can do in year 2 with them. Connor Norby, he showed some pretty decent things this past year, so keep an eye on him. Someone like Griffin Conine as well. Sandy Alcantara is going to be coming back. I think he's going to end up getting traded by the deadline. We'll see. Max Meyer, I'm looking to see if this guy can finally take a step forward, but in the end, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Marlins with the same amount of wins, maybe even less. On to the Central, let's talk about the Cubs. They have them at 90.6, so let's bump that up to 91 wins. The Cubs have had a pretty solid offseason overall. Now, they traded away Cody Bellinger to the Yankees. Kyle Hendricks ended up leaving in free agency. They sent back Isaac Paredes in the Kyle Tucker trade, but they've made some pretty solid additions here. Obviously, Kyle Tucker, this is a 5-win player that you're adding to your team. He's going to be very good. He did deal with some injuries this past year, only 78 games, but he had a 4.2 F-WAR over that time. So I think it's pretty safe to say he should be at least a 5-win player. You also brought in Ryan Presley from the Astros. He's going to be a good arm at the back end of the bullpen there. That should add a win. Matthew Boyd was in the early going of the offseason. He'll be a dependable guy at the back end of the rotation there. I think that's at least a win or 2. Colin Rea for some depth. John Birdie for the bench. And don't forget, Matt Shaw, one of the top prospects in all of Major League Baseball. This guy had a great year in the minor leagues. I'm very high on Matt Shaw. I think he's going to be very good. I would not be surprised at all to see him be the opening day guy at third base. Now, I also will hold out the possibility here that the Cubs could maybe go after Alex Bregman on a short-term deal. If the Astros and him can't figure out something long-term, then maybe the Cubs, who are interested in a short-term deal, could bring him in. That would add at least 4 wins to your team. So I think this is a pretty safe number for the Cubs. I think 90 wins, I think, is a good mark. I think they've had a pretty solid offseason. On to the Brewers, and they have them finishing with 80 wins after winning 93 this past year. I think that's a pretty harsh drop-off. Now, they are are losing Willy Adames. He was a 5-win player this past year, so that will definitely hurt. Devin Williams, he came back late, but that's losing right around a win. And they did bring in Nestor Cortez. That should add a couple of wins back for the rotation. Now, the key for the Brewers is they're going to need some of these young guys to really take a step forward. Joey Ortiz, he's going to be the full-time shortstop moving forward. Sal Frelick, can you get a bit more out of him? Garrett Mitchell, they're going to need a little bit more out of him. King Churio, keep doing what he's doing. King Churio, keep doing what he was doing in the second half. Yelich, is he going to be healthy? Contreras, can he keep up what he's been doing over the last couple of years? So I think there are some question marks there. Rhys Hoskins, can you get a bit more production out of him? Remember last year he came back after an ACL tear, so maybe a bit better production out of him. The rotation, you're getting Brandon Woodruff back. Let's see what the health is going to be like with the shoulder. Nestor Cortez, like I said, that's a good addition for the rotation. I just do wonder about the depth of the rotation a little bit, and will this bullpen be okay without Devin Williams? But still, I think 80 wins is a bit harsh. I think anywhere from 85 to 90 competing for that division is pretty fair. Moving on to the Cardinals, they have them at 78.6, so let's bump them up to 79 wins. They had 83 wins this past year. I think a lot of people out there think that they did a lot worse than this, but no, they finished over 500. They still have talent on this team, but the problem is they just haven't done anything this offseason. Paul Goldschmidt had a down year. He's going to the Yankees. Andrew Kittredge, he was okay for them in the bullpen going to the Orioles. So they didn't really lose a ton, but they didn't really add anything either. The only chance the Cardinals are going to have this year is if they get some better production out of Jordan Walker and Victor Scott. These guys were negative wins above replacements last year, so if you can get some positive production out of them, that could definitely be a big step in the right direction. Mason Wynn, can he take a step forward with the bat? Wilson Contreras, can he get a bit more out of him? And how's the defense going to be at first base? Arenado, can that bat get going a little bit? His power went down this past year. So I still think this lineup is more than capable, but where I worry is the rotation, right? Sonny Gray, Fetty, fine, but, Michaelis, Piante, Steven Matson, I don't know about that. I think the rotation's a little weak. You still got Helsley at the back end. You got a couple of decent arms in here, but I just think the overall pitching staff is a bit weak, and I'm not sure how this Cardinals team is going to do over a full season. I could see a bit of a regression here from the 83 wins. I think 79 to 80 sounds about right. On to the Pirates, and they have them finishing with 75 wins, 1 win less than last year. Now, the Pirates, they brought in Spencer Horwitz. I like that addition. That's going to be a nice bat for the lineup. That should add a couple of wins to the team. They brought back Adam Frazier, Tim Meza, Caleb Ferguson for the bullpen. So I think these additions should counteract the loss of Aroldis Chapman, Jalen Beeks, Grandal, and Joe. The problem is they just didn't really get all that much better. Now, they're going to have these young guys step up. Ke'Bryan Hayes, they need more out of that bat. Nick Gonzalez, you need a little bit more out of him. Brian Reynolds, he's got to kind of get back to what he was doing a couple of years ago. Joey Bart, he looked pretty good in a small sample. Can he keep it going? And don't forget, you got Henry Davis, Andy Rodriguez. Can these guys actually contribute? So they need more in this lineup. They got to hit. They had a terrible offense last year. I also wouldn't mind the addition of Randall Grichuk for this lineup. I think that would be a nice platoon bat out there for the outfield. Pitching-wise, yeah, Paul Skeens, he's the star of the show. He's going to give you some great production. Keller, I'd like a little bit more out of him. Jared Jones, hopefully a bit more better health this coming year. I think David Bednar is a big key for the Pirates this year. He had a negative wins above replacement this past year, so let's get him going a little bit. For the Pirates, I don't know. I'm kind of just a little on the Pirates. Right now, I'm anywhere from 75 to 78 wins, maybe 80. And last but not least, in the Central, they have the Reds at 73.5, so let's bump that up to 74. I think they're being a little harsh on the Reds here. Now, the biggest loss for the Reds this year was trading away Jonathan India, but they brought back Brady Singer in return. Fernando Cruz, trading him to the Yankees. I actually feel like that was a pretty underrated loss, right? He was a good arm for them, had a lot of strikeouts. They also brought in Gavin Lux from the Dodgers, Taylor Rogers. So a lot of trades here with the Reds. I feel like the addition of Singer, Lux, and Rogers should make up the difference for the loss of India and Cruz. Now, the biggest key going to be staying healthy, right? Matt McClain, if he can stay healthy over a full season, I think that's at least a few wins. TJ Friedel, he was very good a couple of years ago. That should at least be a few wins right there. Christian Encarnacion Strand, a lot of power in that bat. He should be productive if he's healthy. Jamer Candelario, they brought him in last offseason. They're going to need more production out of him. So if these guys can stay healthy, I think they can bring some big contributions here to the Reds. I'm not worried about the starting pitching. I think the bullpen is fine. Alexis Diaz, I think, needs to be a bit more consistent. But overall, 73.5 wins, I think that's a bit low. I'm actually going to go a bit higher here. I could see anywhere from 82 to 85 wins. Moving on to the West, let's start at the bottom here with the Rockies. They had 61 wins this past year. They're projected for 55.5. Let's go to 56. And I'm fine with that. The Rockies, they basically did nothing this offseason. They're going to be counting on guys like Chris Bryant to finally get it going, trying to live up to that contract. Nolan Jones had some injuries this past year, so if they can get some positive production out of these guys, that's only going to help there. Excited to see what Brenton Doyle can do here moving forward. Ezekiel Tavar, these guys are pretty solid this past year. Michael Toglia, this is a guy that has some power potential there, so I'm excited to see what he can do. One guy to keep an eye on, though, is Jordan Beck. He hit very well in the minor leagues last year. He came up to the majors, ended up getting hurt, missed a lot of time this past year, but last year in the minors had a 540 on the slugging, a 395 on base, hit 316, had 8 homers. Jordan Beck, look out for him. I think he could be a guy that flies under the radar. The problem with the Rockies, though, is just there's no pitching. There's nothing in the rotation. You got German Marquez coming back, but really, how much is that going to do? The bullpen lacks arms, So for the Rockies, I'm okay with 55 to 60 wins. On to the Giants, and they have them at 78 wins after winning 80 this past year. I'm not sure about that. I like some of the moves the Giants made this past offseason. Willie Adames, that's a solid addition there. That should be at least 4 wins added. Justin Verlander, who knows what you're going to get out of him. I think at least a win from Justin Verlander is okay. I think these two, combined for around 5, that should make up for the loss of Michael Conforto, Mark Canha, Taylor Rogers. I think that's actually a bit of an improvement. I'll say a few wins right there. And then you're going to be getting back Young-Hoo Lee for a full season. That should be a couple of wins in itself. Robbie Ray is going to be back for a full year. Maybe a bit more production from Kyle Harrison, Jordan Hicks. You got a solid closer moving forward now in Ryan Walker. So I think for the Giants, I think anywhere from 84 to 87 wins sounds about right. Moving on to the Padres. They have them at 82.5 wins. Let's bump that up to 83, and that's a 10-win difference from this past year. And I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of in line with that. They haven't made any additions so far. They've only lost guys. Jerickson Profar was a 4-win player this past year. He went to the Braves. Tanner Scott, very good for them down the stretch. Kyle Higashioka was a solid option for them this past year at the catcher position. That's right around 6 to 7 wins that they just lost, and they haven't added anyone. Now, taking a look at the lineup, right, Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts, could we start to see, some aging here, right? Bogaerts, he missed a lot of time this past year. The numbers were not good with him. Manny Machado, you saw a bit of a decrease in the power this past year. What's he going to look like going into his age 33 season? Sure, I'm excited about Jackson Merrill, Fernando Tatis Jr., but could Jackson Merrill have some growing pains now that the league has seen him for a full season? They're going to make adjustments against him. He's going to have to make some adjustments back. What are you going to be getting out of Ornelas out in left field? Elias Diaz, what's he going to give you? I think there's some question marks here. Luis Arise, is he even going to be on the team before opening day? In the rotation, Dylan Cease, Michael King, they've been on the trade block. Are they still going to be with the Padres by opening day? Robert Suarez too. So there's a lot of question marks right now. I think the fact that they haven't added anyone, there could be some regression with some guys. And, I'm kind of in line with that. I think 83, 84, maybe 85 wins sounds right. On to the Diamondbacks. They have them at 86 wins compared to 89 this past season. I think they're going to be more in line with what they did in 2024, maybe even a little bit better. Now, they lost Christian Walker to the Astros. They are losing a bit of thump there, but they brought some back in Josh Naylor. That's going to be some good power for the lineup to make up for that. And you brought in Corbin Burns to the top of your rotation. The rotation was already very good. And then you add Corbin Burns there. That should be 4 wins overall. And then Gallen, you got Kelly, Erod, Fa. I mean, my goodness, what a deep rotation. Jordan Montgomery, is he still going to be with the team on opening day? I'm not sure. Bullpen, you got a lot of good arms back here. Justin Martinez, there are some control issues with him. Very good velo, good stuff. Could they add a veteran guy back here? I still think that's possible. And then looking at the lineup, I mentioned Josh Naylor earlier, but Corbin Carroll, he got off to a bit of a slow start last year. Hopefully he's got himself right. We see a full season of consistency. Ketel Marte, a very good season this past year. The one thing with him over the years has been the health. Can he keep it going here? Lourdes Gurriel Jr., that's fine. Jake McCarthy, he looked pretty solid this past year. Eugenio Suarez gave them some good power. Pavin Smith, I would like to see them add a right-handed bat, someone like Justin Turner, maybe JD Martinez, a reunion there, a bit more health from Gabriel Moreno, Geraldo Perdomo as well. And don't forget about Jordan Lawler. He was hurt last year. Can he make a contribution to the team this coming year? Alec Thomas, can you get a bit more out of him? I just think there's a lot of upside with this team. So 86, I think, is a bit low. I know you're going to see a lot of competition in this division, but I think the Diamondbacks are very good. I think 90 wins is realistic. And last but not least, we got the Dodgers at 103.8. Let's bump that up to 105. I absolutely think they can do that. I mean, they just had a ridiculous offseason. They added Blake Snell, Roki Sasaki, Tanner Scott, Kirby Yates, Hai-Sung Kim, Michael Conforto. Am I forgetting someone? I feel like I'm forgetting someone. And all they've lost was Gavin Lux. Jack Flaherty just went back to the Tigers, but they only had him for a third of the season. He was worth right around a win for them. Walker Buehler was a negative F4 for them this past year. He pitched better in the postseason. Kike Hernandez, a utility guy, right around a win. So you've really added around 7 to 8 wins here on top of the great season that you just had at 98. I definitely think 105 wins is more than capable. And then, if you're thinking about the guys that you already have, Shohei Ohtani, he's going to be on the mound this year. I mean, maybe, Max Muncy, he gets a bit more consistent this coming year. My goodness. There's just so much to like. This could end up being an all-timer here with the Dodgers. What a great team this is looking like. I think 105 wins is definitely possible. Who knows? Maybe even 110. Maybe they could even break the record for most wins in a regular season. We'll just have to wait and see. But everyone, those are my thoughts on the latest PECOTA projections. Tell me your thoughts down below in the comments. Would you go higher on some of these? Would you go lower? Would you go right around what they had? Let me know down below in the comments. But if you can on the way out, hit that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new. We're trying to get to 50K by opening day. But with that said, everybody, have yourself a good day. I'll talk to you next time.